or maybe it was 1 point. I think it was tied going into the fourth quarter. And then the Nuggets just had a couple of runs. I think they went on a 13-0 run at one point, and hit some threes. And then Jokic, who, but Monty, coming into this game, I've been covering the Celtics Heat series, and people have been riding, Tatum for not being able to deliver in the fourth quarter, no baskets the first two games. And I'm like, yeah, well, who else didn't have baskets the first two games? Nikola Jokic. He had no baskets in the fourth quarter of the first two games. And I wasn't taking a shot at him. I was just illustrating that just because you don't have a basket doesn't necessarily mean it's that it defines you. But Jokic had 4 or 5 baskets in the fourth quarter in this one, and the Lakers couldn't get a stop. And I think there was a thought that the Lakers, and I was in that group, that I thought the Lakers would make it at least a challenging of a series because they'd been so good at home this year, and the Nuggets in the playoffs, and the Nuggets had not quite been the same team on the road. But then Jamal Murray happened, and that pretty much ended that. And so what we now have here is the question is, is this Denver team, this Denver team is the look of a champion right now. The Lakers are secondary. The Nuggets' strength to me is primary. What we've learned for the last 5 or 6 days here.
Yeah, and I feel like I've been saying this, that the moment I really bought in on Denver, like I had Denver winning the West coming into it. When I bought in on the idea that they could win it all, it was actually a game they lost. It was at the end of game 4 against Minnesota. Well, I want to say they were down about 10, and then they just had a moment where it was like, all right, boys, let's stop messing around. Boom, Murray for 3. Boom, Murray for 3. Boom, Porter for 3. Jokic gets the ball and just backs Rudy Gobert into the stanchion. And then if you remember that game, he missed the first of 2 free throws. If he makes that, they sweep that and clean it out. But they seem to be like the only team I've seen so far that has that ability to just lock in and say, okay, we're going to do this. Not just a matter of, our shots are falling, right? Like, oh, wow, we just happened to get on a run, where it just seems like they can make a decision that they're going to do it. And I feel like they demonstrated that a couple of times in this series against the Lakers, who, bless their hearts, they haven't backed down once. Like, they have impressed me so much with their ability to just keep getting up. But then you just got to the end of this series and it's like, oh, what happened is one of these teams is just a lot better than the other, and they got the best player left in the whole tournament. And I don't know how at this point Denver wouldn't be your favorite to win the championship no matter who comes out of the East.
Yeah, I mean, I think Denver has some weaknesses that the Lakers maybe haven't been able to take advantage of, particularly their defense at times. There was stretches in this game where it was just score, 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 and Denver got away with having sort of bad defensive stretches because their offense was so great. I'm not so sure that that they will be able to do that, every single night. The Lakers are great, but the way they were able to withstand the Lakers, Anthony Davis, particularly in the first half, playing really, really well. But, here's the thing about the Nuggets. They were in the bubble. They made the conference finals in the bubble. And then the following year, they did the trade at the trade deadline, for Aaron Gordon. And they had this 8-game stretch. I think it was 8 games, I want to say, right after they did that trade, where he elevated their defense. Because, their defense for like 3 or 4 years was routinely like 27th.
Right.
And so they did the Aaron Gordon trade, and like he was like the turnkey guy who made their defense way better. And they had this like 3-week stretch where it was like, oh my God, this might be a championship team. And then Jamal Murray blew out his ACL. And then he didn't come back at all the following year. And they just didn't have the same firepower. And so really, I think they've just sort of rejoined that team that they had coming out, the year after the bubble, where they were a championship level team, except for Jokic is now better. Murray is now healthy, and they've been able to smooth some of the edges off of Michael Porter. They've been able to go out and get some role players like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown, who are classic role-playing type of guys who on a championship team. And so, like, and they were the number one seed throughout the entire season in the Western Conference. Like, I mean, their profile is of a team that should have a chance to win a championship, and they happen to now be playing some of their best basketball because they're playing the Lakers, who have LeBron and AD. They're getting diminished, but they are actually right on schedule of a team that would win a title.
Yeah, that had been my thought for the longest. I had been saying for years, just like, all right, something is happening here, right? And it's just, I thought about this a few days ago. I'm 42 years old. This is the first time in my life that the Nuggets have been a legitimate championship contender, right? Where you could go in and look at that team and truly say, I think they can win a championship. They got to the conference finals in 09. Nobody thought they were going to win a championship that year. This is the first time they've ever been in that discussion. And so I think they were making that slow build, and with a center who can't protect the rim, which is kind of this ironic thing that I think a lot of us will always have trouble grasping, the idea that you can control a game that much from that position and not be a guy that at the very least can put up some resistance at the rim. Because if they do win this, even those Heat teams, the LeBron, D-Wade, Chris Bosh ones, where they gave up on rebounding and just decided we're going to play smothering perimeter defense, at least they had Chris Bosh to protect the rim. That, I think, is the hardest thing for people to grasp. But then I looked up and I was like, if we're talking about a team where Aaron Gordon is your fourth best player and Michael Porter is your third best player, or Jamal Murray is your third best player, depending on the night or how you want to look at it, I mean, that's a lot of firepower to come out here with. And Malone has them acting like they're supposed to win a championship, which I think may be the marginal difference that matters in the end on this.
Yeah. So you mentioned that the Nuggets haven't had much success in their team history. You know, one of the handful of teams that has never made the finals. Just think of this stat. They've never had a sweep in the history of their team.
Wow.
They've never had a sweep.
Wow.
So, you know, they have had, you know, quite a few 50-win teams over the years where, you know, you would have had the firepower to do it. Yeah. And I think Jamal Murray has, I mean, you know, Jamal came out and he did this interview with Mark Spears after game 2. And I don't remember the exact verbiage that he used, but he basically said he was being disrespected. And, you know, here's the thing. First off, he's on a max contract. So if you're on a max contract, you know, you're not being disrespected, but okay. I know that this is the stance that they're going to take. They're being disrespected. He had a good season this year, but he was not great. He had moments where he was great, but, you know, he averaged 20 points and 6 assists. That's good. But like, there was like 50 guys in the NBA this year that averaged 20 points. He is averaging like 28, 30 points in the postseason. And in this game, he has a 30-point half, which, again, I'll just sort of say this is sort of the Nuggets returning to schedule. We had a couple of 30-point halves in the bubble, which we saw, you know, tremendous shooting in there, and he was especially incredible. And when they had that comeback against the Clippers, you remember some of the moments he had in that series. And the Clippers and the Jazz, I think they came back from, and he was just red hot. So to have a game like this, though, where he has a 30-point half on the road in an extreme hostile environment in a high value game, you know, down 2-0 playing at home, this is the best punch you're ever going to take from a team. And AD came out, you know, he wasn't his best in game 2. He came out and played really well out of the gates and everything. Bo, he scores 30 in the first half without taking a free throw. He took 20. Now, I actually want to say it's almost like a commentary on Jokic, that is a guy at a 2-time MVP, where, and forget the outside noise that he's got to prove anything to anybody. Just the idea that you're the MVP, the 2-time MVP, and you're going into this high leverage game, you're probably thinking, all right, I got to come in here and I got to really get this done. He allows Murray to do this. I mean, it's a commentary on the way their team is structured. It's not a surprise, by the way, but it's a commentary. But he scores 30 points in the situation in the first half. I mean, that's a transcendent performance. That's a you know, you're into like first ballot Hall of Famer stuff doing that. And so, yes, Jamal, I did not regard you as that level of a guy who could do that And I guess I should have. So I guess you were underrated. You didn't make the All-Star team. You didn't make the All-NBA team, but he also didn't play like this. The
Right.
way he's playing in the postseason is a higher level than we saw in the regular season.
Yeah, like, I could be torn at points, especially like when you look at the advanced numbers. And like when I talk about him and Porter, and I think I'm higher on Porter than a lot of people are, but I mean, he's 6'10 and shooting 40% from three, right? Like that is a rarity to have. And Murray's a bit of a defensive liability. Like you could make an argument that Porter's a better player. But the thing about Murray and is what we saw in the bubble, and we just hadn't had a chance to see since then, is there's certain dudes in these moments and in this particular setting of the playoffs where this game gets to be a bit reduced and what you can do in the pick and roll and in those 2-minute games matters more, where he can just have nights like those. Like he put up 30 in this half after putting up, what was it, 23 or 26 in the fourth quarter
23
the night before. Yeah, I mean, that's bananas that you could do that in 53 points.
Bo, incredible point. 53 points in 3 quarters.
Yeah.
Holy hell.
Holy hell. Like this is absurd. And there just aren't that many people who are capable of doing that. But the game dynamics of the playoffs come up where he's going to do that there in a way that's not going to happen in the regular season. Like, I don't even think it's just a matter of, the stakes get higher and he gets better. It's like, no, the game gets simpler in a lot of ways when you get to this point. And once it gets there, he can be that guy that could get it done. The only concern I had, and while it was great that he was making all those shots, you do look around and you're like, okay, these cats look like they got a little bit cold just watching you play basketball. Like when the chances came for them to actually have open shots, they were like, oh, wow, I got the ball. Because once Murray's like that, he ain't looking at nobody else. That's just not how it works. And you understand why, but it can be a bit of a problem.
Well, this reminds me of a story. I've told it before. I hope I'm not repeating to the listeners, but World Be Free. You remember World Be Free? I mean, it's kind of before our time, but he was in the 80s, a historic gunner. And I remember there was a journalist who used to cover him, and who would he be compared to today? Just, one of these guys, just high volume shooter. And
they honestly don't make them like that anymore.
You're right. But my dad used to say that, World would get 3 shots up when he was waiting to check into the game, at the scorer's table. So he had this quote that I'll never forget where he was saying after a game, he's like, it's really hard to average 20 in the NBA. And the reporter goes, oh yeah, points. And he goes, no, shots. and by the way, he's right. It's kind of hard to average 20 shots. You gotta have a lot of things to fall into place to average 20 shots. He gets up 20 in the first half. I mean, I agree. I don't think it's necessarily a formula that you want to follow, but like to do that in that setting, you got to take your hat off to him because the Lakers did come to play.
Yeah.